are men being duped or are women being duped, or neither or both? Like, that's kind of like the debate right here that they're having. Megyn Kelly saying that men are being duped, and that if you just left men alone and stopped feeding them far right talking points, they would become attracted to these women in much larger numbers. And Matt's point is that if women would stop being duped, then they would understand that this is sort of normal and that you can't attract a man by pursuing a career.
Hi, welcome to Jeremy Pryor's podcast, or what I like to call Jeremy Pryor Unfiltered. I'm his daughter and producer, Kelsey Gall, and we are excited to bring you seasons of content all the way from Tolkien to theology, from business to family. If you like to contemplate deep philosophical ideas across a wide range of topics, you've come to the right place. Make sure you give us a follow so you don't miss out on future episodes.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. All right, I am joined by my lovely daughter, Sydney Parshall, and my son, Jackson, zooming in from a bathroom he's working on, I assume.
This is one of the bathrooms.
Oh, one of our bathrooms. Okay.
Yeah.
You got to take them, you know, when your kids are at this stage, they're working. He's a working man. So, but thanks, Jackson, for jumping in onto this. I can really get a working man's perspective on what we're about to talk about today, and also a new bride's perspective on this as well, since Sydney's recently gotten married. So this is a very interesting conversation. So I wanted to tease out, and this is, so in our family WhatsApp chat, I threw out this video and thought, hey guys, like, I'd love to get your take on this. There was a really interesting kind of spat between Matt Walsh and Megyn Kelly on a topic that I think we've tried to understand and talk about a lot. And apparently what happened was that there was a conversation in which Megyn Kelly was really frustrated with the fact that men are not as attracted to like kind of high-powered career women as she would hope, and she's kind of making a case for why she thinks like men should be. Matt then brings up a video from last year where Megyn Kelly really went after him for telling women what they should care about. And so he kind of brings it back up and says, okay, Megyn, maybe I don't know how women, what women should care about, but I do really understand what men care about. And I think you don't in this case. And then he gives a defense for why he thinks men, it's sort of a fool's errand to try to get men to become attracted to women in the way that she's describing, in the way that she would hope. Like, so there's really a collision of ideals, and that at this level, this is what I find really interesting. It's not of course that men are never attracted to high-powered career women. There's many men who are, and there's many couples that are. The question really comes down to, ideally speaking, there seems to be a desire on the part of women that this kind of ambition would make them more attractive to men than they tend to be. And so there's often a conversation that happens between women about why is this? A confusion, really. And so Matt tries to like unveil his thesis for why this is the case. So nobody's really disputing whether or not this is the case. Megyn Kelly agrees this is the case, and she's confused by it and is frustrated by it. And Matt Walsh also thinks this is the case, but he thinks there's actually an adaptive reason for why this is the case, and he's going to try to explain this to her. So I'll play a couple of clips from this and get your all's reaction. I'll start with Megyn Kelly's, description of the frustration, and then we'll get into Matt's his reasoning for why he thinks this is actually ideal and not simply something that men need to overcome. All right, so let me share this with you guys.
That I don't understand women. I'm trying to control women. I'm trying to tell women what to do. I'm trying to be Jesus. I'm trying to be the Jesus of women or whatever. I'm judging women. I'm putting up guardrails. Now, I don't think that that's an accurate characterization at all, but I do think that these terms would pretty well describe Megyn's attitude towards young men. So here she is on her show last week. Listen.
Here's what's happening on the right. Young women, I talk to young conservative women all the time about their lives and their goals and, the things that they want. And what's happening is they can't find men who are maybe more conservative. Usually they're looking for somebody who is religious, like a lot of conservative women tend to be God God-loving conservatives. And they can't find a lot of young men who want to marry a working woman now. And this is an actual problem that's coming up on the right. And to me, it's so sad because it's like, how did we get to the point where we're now telling young, conservative, amazing women that they're not attractive if they also work, if they choose to, let's say, do what I'm doing and what you're doing and like get their voice out there. But I'll stick with me just because I think conservatives listening to this will like the thought of another Megyn Kelly voice up and coming. Well, why wouldn't we want that? Why would we take somebody who's talented in this field and really wants to make a difference and have the messaging to her be, you're really not that valuable unless you give it up and go into the home and only have a family and only raise a family. And not only are we sending her that message, but young men are actually believing that. They're actually believing it, especially on the right, because like the trad mom has gotten so popular. And it's like, no, if we do that, we're not going to have any strong conservative or right-leaning women to provide a role model for younger conservative women who, and there's nothing to apologize for here, don't necessarily want to spend all their 20s and their 30s getting married and having kids.
So Megyn says that young men these days don't want to marry a career woman. And she says this is a real problem. She says that these young men are not attracted to working women, but obviously she thinks they should be, that these men are believing the, anti-feminist propaganda. They've been duped, says Megyn Kelly. It's very sad. She says it's sad. In other words, it seems that the one putting up guardrails and judging other people for what they want in life is Megyn Kelly. Megyn doesn't seem to understand these young men. She says that I don't understand women, she says, and I probably understand women more than she thinks I do, but I admit that I don't understand them perfectly. I'm not a woman after all. I've been married to a woman for almost 15 years. I'm raising 2 girls. I have a mom and 4 sisters. I'm not clueless on the subject, but I'm not an expert on the inner life of women, and I've never claimed to be.
So that's the framing that Megyn Kelly. Now we're gonna let Matt unpack his thesis, but his point there is that she's frustrated by this, and she thinks this is an ideological movement on the right. That there's something that has recently convinced men to not be as attracted as they otherwise naturally would be to very career-oriented women, and then she does, I think, make a very good point, which is that if this trend continues, you're going to potentially have less career-oriented women, which means less Megyn Kellys. That's an interesting point, which is which is fair. So, Sydney, we'll start with you. When you hear this, I want to get your first take, and then we'll let Matt unpack the rest here.
There's so much. I don't even know where to start. I just really don't appreciate her framing of what she's describing. She's, like you said, she's describing it as if this is some newfound fad that like the trad mom is becoming popular, is what she said. And that's just hilarious. I wanted to laugh at that because what do you mean the trad mom is becoming so popular? That's what it has been for the last thousands of years. Like that's what has happened. So
That's what the word trad means.
yeah, that's what trad means, traditional. So yeah, I think it's silly that she's framing it as if this is a newfound thing and men are just so attracted to that. And it's so strange because most women want to go into the workplace. So like, this is so sad. This is so sad. I want to be clear that I'm not judging women for wanting to be in the workplace, but I just think that you have to admit at some point that there is something that men want. And what men don't usually look for is another man or another someone that can do the same thing that they do, which is going outside of the home and providing. And I think what most men are looking for is someone that will be focusing on the other things, which is actually reproducing and having the children and making sure that they're being fed and that they're being loved all day. So there are things like that men can't usually afford to do because they're so busy providing for the family. So what they're looking for is someone to match him by focusing on the other things that they can't do. And that makes a lot of sense. And I think that men judge women and women judge men because we are out there looking for
our life partner. And I think that's natural. I think that's fine. But I think as women, we need to not kid ourselves and realize that it's going to be harder to find a man that is totally okay with both of you having the same role. Like that is going to be hard, especially when you're a believer, like she said, especially when you're a God believer.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that it's not a new thing. It is the ideal for a lot of men because they want someone that will be able to do different roles from them. So I just think it's very disingenuous and just kind of delusional to
Yeah.
say like that they should be doing something else
Right.
when this
They should
has
be
been the
attracted to
natural
something
bend.
else.
Yeah, when this has been the natural bend for however long,
Awesome.
since the beginning of time.
Okay. Great. Jackson, you want to say anything about this clip before we let Matt unveil his thesis?
Another kind of like Sydney was just doing, like setting the stage. One thing that comes to mind is how people seem to think that these two things can run in parallel, that you can have as she puts it, a high power career and in parallel have a successful family. The way that I see it is if you're actually trying to have a high power career and the way that is framed and everything, you're heading into a very competitive market, which means for the most part, and it's also but it's a task that everybody else has a degree in this task. Everybody else was hired, and the question is who is going to advance to the next stage. And the way that these corporations work, so I'm assuming it's somewhere it's like a high power career in their perspective for the most part is corporate work. The way that they kind of work is almost like a video game where at the very beginning you don't really have that many benefits, you don't really have that much, like it's not a great entry level job. And there's so much that you could have, if you just work hard enough and get to that other place and stay with us for a long time and that sort of a stuff. So there's a roadmap that they create to get you to that next stage. And that roadmap always and then you're like, well, like always consists of something that will put you ahead of your coworkers. But if everybody has the same degree, everybody here is college educated, everybody here has been here for a certain amount of time, everybody here's producing, like, how do I get my competitive edge? It's almost always like working more and working more for them and having more loyalty to the company by working there longer. So this is a long, extremely, so this which basically means that the career is going to have access to your time more than your children or your husband. And that's what the husband's thinking. He's like, okay, so in order for you to have a career, it's going to be a huge priority. It has to be a priority for you. Otherwise, you're never going to get very far. Like you're never going to get to the high power part. You're just going to have a job, But if you want a career, then you're going to climb that corporate ladder. You're going to need to be extremely available, willing to take on any amount of overtime, willing to take on the worst workload. And so that's when the husband's kind of like, well, I was willing to do that, to Cindy's point. So if we both do that, like who the heck, like, where's the family, So we're just kind of two people working together, So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So there's sort of a natural. I like how you frame the idea that like, yeah, these are competitive situations in which if you are constantly making sacrifices for the family, it's going to put you at a disadvantage in a competitive workplace. And that's the thing that the husband is like concerned about. What does that actually do for the prospects of us raising a successful family? Doesn't make it impossible, but in many, many, many cases, that's a trade-off that needs to be squarely faced. And it could be that he's just like, hey, that I want to make sure that when we face that trade-off, you're going to choose the family, and then I will choose this career path in order to provide for the family. So that's kind of the traditional division. All right, let me bring Matt back in and we'll hear his thesis and get your guys' take on this.
I'd like to make a few points. First of all, Megyn is correct about her fundamental observation that men are generally not attracted to ambitious, career-driven women. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that men will not marry those kinds of women. And I'm not saying that wives should never have jobs. In many households, both parents work out of financial necessity. I understand that. There are also many different kinds of jobs that a woman might take on, which don't always require going to an office full-time. My own wife is right now working on organizing a fundraising gala for a Catholic homeschool hybrid academy. She enjoys it. She's good at it. It's a service that she's able to provide to support quality Catholic education. and she can do it at home. And I am caricatured by people like Megyn as believing that women should only ever do the dishes and laundry and nothing else, but that's not actually my view. I think a woman's first priority should be the children and the home, but that doesn't mean she can't do other things and pursue other vocations alongside that. And as I said, in many cases, a family might feel that they need 2 full-time incomes in order to survive. I understand all of that, but this conversation is about ideals and about attraction. What is the ideal that men strive for? What qualities do they find attractive in a woman? So most men ideally would like to earn an income that would allow them to be the sole breadwinner in the home. Most men like the idea of being the provider. That ideal will not always become a reality, but it is the ideal. And as for attraction, men are not generally attracted to a woman's professional ambitions. And that's just not the quality that attracts a man to a woman. Now, that isn't to say that men are never attracted to women with careers. What I'm saying is that the fact that a woman has a career will rarely be the thing, or even one of the things, that men find attractive about her. Okay? When a man is talking to his friends about a woman he's dating, he's almost certainly not going to say any version of this. Dude, she's great. She takes her career really seriously. She's super ambitious. She has so much earning potential. Now, that's the kind of thing that a woman might say to her friends, usually maybe using different words, but that's the kind of idea that a woman might communicate to her friends about the man that she's dating. A man is not going to say that about a woman. As a man, I have never heard another man say anything approaching that about a woman that he's dating or married to. I've never heard that, because men and women are different. They are looking for different things, Megyn. A man might be attracted to a woman with a career, but he's not going to be attracted to her because of her career. And a woman who puts her career before anything, a woman who prioritizes her professional ambitions above all else, will be very unappealing to the vast majority of men. And I know that might be upsetting for you to hear, Megyn, but it's just true, okay? Because men and women are different and they want different things. The difference between the romantic interests of a man and of a woman could perhaps be best summarized this way. Here's a kind of a thought experiment. If you give a man a choice between an attractive, sweet, kind, feminine grocery store cashier who makes $13 an hour and wants nothing more than to become a mother one day, or a high-powered, ambitious, loud, rich corporate girl boss whose greatest dream is to be a CEO one day, most men, I'm telling you, will choose the former without hesitation. They don't even need to go and consult their friends about it or think about it or pray about it. They're going to take the former. Okay, they're going to take the cashier. Now, if you give women the same choice, the mild-mannered, unambitious guy working a cash register or the highly paid corporate go-getter, you're going to have a lot more takers for the latter option. A lot more. Now, why is that? Am I saying that most women are greedy gold diggers looking for a rich man to bleed dry? Am I saying that most men are oppressive tyrants looking for some meek, helpless woman they can control? No. No on both counts. I'm saying that men and women are different and they want different things. Okay? A man is not looking for a business partner. He's not looking for someone to provide for him. He wants a wife. He wants a mother for his future children. He wants a helpmate. He wants a woman, not a man. This is not a new phenomenon. Megyn calls this desire of young men a problem that is coming up on the right. But it's not a problem, and it's not coming up. Kim Iverson responded in agreement with Megyn and said that she, quote, doesn't get this trad wife trend. But what she's calling a trend, or what Megyn says is just coming up, is in fact the norm. It's the way human society has been organized since the dawn of civilization. A young man seeking a woman who will have his children and prioritize raising them and keeping a home is doing the same thing that billions of other young men have done since time immemorial. This traditional approach is not some new fad invented by TikTok influencers, nor is it a far-right conspiracy. It is the way of human civilization. These young men, they want what their grandfathers wanted, and what their grandfathers' grandfathers wanted, and what their grandfathers' grandfathers' grandfathers wanted, and on through the ages.
Their grandfathers. Okay, Sydney. Yeah. So he laid out his thesis. What stood out to you in that?
I think he worded it so well. Like, I think he framed it well when he said, like, I'm not saying that women are gold diggers and men are tyrants, but they just want different things because they are different. I feel like he just worded that really well. And especially when he was kind of putting on the caveats of like, we're talking about ideal here. Like, I'm not saying that this should be the case for everyone. And if this isn't the case for you, then you're doing it wrong. Like, we're talking about the ideals. I think that's really important to state because I think without those caveats, people take things the wrong way when in these kinds of conversations. So, yeah, but I think it's so good. It's so hard nowadays, especially with feminism, because I think there are some things on the woke left that people have seen as just not realistic, and like most people with common sense don't believe in it anymore. But I think feminism is still the thing that most people still believe in now, even if they're on the conservative side, like Megyn Kelly. So I think this topic is so difficult because now we have generations of women who have spent their whole lives thinking about what career they want and then are wanting to pursue that career after all that time and then need the education and then they need to put the years that they spend in education to good use, and so they need to spend years in the field. And I get really passionate about this topic because I think it's so sad that there are a lot of women that have spent that much time on their careers without knowing that at some point, for many, many women, their priorities change and they realize that they spent the last years of their youth that would have been perfect for having kids and raising them, on a career that they could have done later on in life. But because this is how the world is doing it, they just did it how everyone else did it. And so I just think we need to stop lying to women and stop trying to get them to do this thing. Stop trying to get them to be men. And so I get passionate about it because there are a lot of women that want careers, maybe just because that's what they've been groomed to want all their life.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, it seems like, yeah, there's sort of a charge of social engineering going on that Megyn Kelly's saying, and this is, Matt Walsh's response is that it's not socially engineered. This is normal. What you're actually
Yeah.
advocating for is to find a way to re-socially engineer men to actually be attracted to this thing.
Right.
When in reality, if you actually were to look at the social engineering, it seems to have happened more to women. I think it's really important to distinguish which. So have women been like, are men being duped or are women being duped or neither or both? Like that's kind of like the debate right here that they're having. Basically, Megyn Kelly saying that men are being duped, and that if you just left men alone and stopped feeding them far right talking points, they would become attracted to these women in much larger numbers. And if Matt's point is that if women would stop being duped, then they would understand that this is sort of normal and that you can't attract a man by pursuing a career. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Doesn't mean that maybe it's something you want for your own reasons or preferences, but that you need to understand that that's not as adaptive to the dating market as you probably have been led to believe.
Have you ever considered starting a family business so you can spend more time working as a family team? We've started a year-long coaching program called Family Inc., where you get weekly coaching with Jeremy, access to our video training for launching family businesses, and lots of ideas for businesses to start that are working for other family teams. Head over to familyteams.com and click Family Inc. to learn more, or to set up a strategy call with Jeremy to see if this might be a good fit for you.
So, Jackson, what does this stir up for you?
There's a couple of caveats I would say that I think is really important when considering this conversation, especially from a Christian perspective. And the first thing that in this conversation about, kind of what's been socially engineered and what's like in our DNA, there seems to be some desire in women to have earning potential of some kind in their DNA. I think that is natural and not socially engineered. And I get that from Proverbs 31, which is probably like the wife chapter. If you're looking for an ideal wife, that is what, because it literally says, the chapter starts with an excellent wife who can find, So if you're looking for a wife, look for these qualities, is the assumption that follows that. And the entire chapter is about basically a woman who is um, investing in real estate and merchandise um, and has a trade, and makes her arms strong and provides for her household. It says that specifically. But I think that and also make sure that it's beautiful. It says that she's like clothes her household with scarlet yarns and stuff like that. So there is something to be said about a woman's desire to provide something, but I think it's less of what that they're providing and it's more of who they're providing, like the reason behind why they're providing it. And in Proverbs 31, it's repeatedly saying that it's all for the household. And this is the second caveat I would say from the man's perspective. I think that it should also be the same that a man's greatness should also come from the household, because a man's greatness is to establish a legacy or a dynasty, and that happens through the household, not from a job. Just like a woman has the same goal, is to establish their family through the generations, but that is also supposed to happen not through the workplace, but through the household. And the difference between a homemaker and a household builder is a homemaker kind of just does chores. I think that's what the mindset people think. Like, I'm just doing chores all day. A household builder is somebody who's doing whatever it takes, taking on whether it's chores or money or anything. She's adapted to the circumstances that are required for the household to advance, and that could come in the form of earning potential and stuff like that. So I think that what's happening is, if you say that the woman is supposed to stay at home and do chores while the man goes and works, you are making it sound like, no, greatness is still achieved outside the home.
Yeah.
And there's a barrier here now. So the woman, you actually can't cross that woman. Sorry. Like, the barrier is here, and the greatness is out there, and you're not supposed to achieve it. But if we kind of pivot and say the corporate job might be a part of that, like somebody might have to climb the ladder, like, too bad, it might be the generation you're in, maybe you want to start a business instead, but it depends, it's not easy to do that. So either way, the Lord is calling you to provide for that household. What should probably happen is, even if it's a corporate job or starting a business or whatever, it should all be funneled through, like, the concept is we're aiding the household in whatever way we can.
Yeah.
So if you switch that perspective, suddenly they're both capable of achieving greatness, because it even says in Proverbs 31, her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband praises her at the gates. Her husband tells her, many women have done excellently, but you surpass them all. So she is earning money and receiving accolades. So it's not necessarily wrong for a woman to want either of those things, but she's getting them in Proverbs 31 through the household. And so she's achieving greatness and income and, accolades. And so, if the husband and wife are getting it from different places, it's going to confuse her and say, why can't I get it from where you're getting it? you know? And I think that's probably a big part of the confusion there.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. I do think it's really important to the assumption that oftentimes women have when they're hearing this is they're going back to the kind of 1950s housewife, where there's one or two kids. She's home all day, bored out of her mind, just slaving for her husband, because he wants to have, sort of this perfect life of some kind where he's got a hot meal when he comes home or something along those lines, as opposed to, what Matt is saying is there's something that used to exist for all time, which was there was a desire for the husband and wife to work together, and the understanding, and that what never came into this conversation was, if you're asking the question, why should the man be the one to go out and pursue the career and to be a part of the economy in a way that he's got to sort of submit to its rules and its needs in order to earn a living, whereas the wife should not do that? The primary reason for that is because she's the one bearing the children. Like, physically, there's a biological reason for that. And one of the things that was never brought up, and I put this in, I went on to Twitter, to X, and was interacting with this video on Matt's, the thread on Matt's channel. And I wrote something that I got, I think maybe the most interaction from this conversation. I just said, the hidden factor in this debate is birth control. Without reliable birth control, every woman would have to prioritize family due to the uncertainty of the number and frequency of kids. So there's a new technology that emerged that has made this is incredibly obvious, and this is important because Matt Walsh, being a very observant Catholic, he is likely has a sort of theological conviction around birth control. The Catholic Church is, famously anti-birth control, and so if that's the case, you really need to have a woman prioritizing the home, because if she doesn't know the frequency or the number of children she's going to bear, for her to, then the husband desperately needs to establish the family's provision himself, because he doesn't know what's going to happen there. So it's important to just bring that up, because the assumption of this technology has given rise to these ideologies. There's really two other massive societal shifts that I think created this. Birth control was one, the Industrial Revolution, which really separated work from home, where before the Industrial Revolution, 80-90% of people that went to work did it through the home or with their family as a team. Post-Industrial Revolution, it sort of flipped the other way. 80-90% of people go to work apart from their family and separated from their family team. That movement has really changed the nature of family. And you can still choose to do these things in and through the home. And so the Proverbs 31 woman is living in a pre-industrial revolution world in which she can do economically productive activity, and it's going to bless her family, and she can do it with her family through the household, and all these things are kind of seamlessly integrated, right? So and then the last thing that I think has occurred, and this has really been dramatic for women in the last 30, 40 years, is that in order to get more people into the workplace, there has been sort of a societal decision to create workplace identity as a primary means of gaining identity, gaining the accolades, Jackson, you were describing, that women used to get in the home. So if you are looking at a woman and, are a young girl in school, or she's in high school or in college, and you're constantly asking her, who do you want to be when you grow up? And you want to make sure that you're emphasizing her career path in an equal way to a young boy's career path, that these are identical, and that we're always going to educate in a way that's androgynous, never becoming gender specific or sensitive to the future family dynamics that are going to be created that are different between men and women. There has been a decision as a society to just squash that whole conversation and to treat men and women equally and in the real drive for equality, and to ignore the both biological and familial differences between men and women, so that women can have an equal shot at these workplace identities, if that's what we're prizing as society. And what's really fascinating to me, like you're saying, Jackson, is the Proverbs 31 woman does suggest that women do need accolades for what they're sacrificing, just the way men do. We all need society to get around and praise what we're doing, what we're a part of. And it's really hard on women to talk about a social engineering coup or a complete revolution of society, to basically say, look, we're going to only praise you as a woman for your successes in workplace identity, but there's not going to be a commensurate praising of your success as a mother. Like that is the day-to-day reality of women. And they grow up watching their mothers like suffer for the sacrifices that they're making, almost no accolades. And then they're being told by society that if you want accolades, you need to go into the workplace. And it's not surprising that women are saying, okay, that's the pathway into that world. But we've created that world. Like, we're the ones who decided to not praise women for the work they're doing in building the household. We're the ones who said, please make sure that you limit the amount of fruitfulness that you're generating through the household by participating in family planning in a really aggressive manner, so that you can live a life that is identical to men. And this was really the goal of second wave and third wave feminism. So yeah, Sydney, I don't know like if that stirs up anything for you, but I think that's part of the context here that maybe doesn't get teased out in this conversation.
Yeah, I think that's so good. I think one of the biggest lies women are being told nowadays is that the important stuff is happening in the world outside of the home. And if you're inside of the home, you're not making a difference. You're not an example to all these women, to use Megyn Kelly's verbiage. It's we're missing out on all these women when they go into their homes and focus on their children and all that stuff. I think that is simply ridiculous. I think the biggest impact is in the home. That is just not even a debate. If you're not in the home and you're not focusing on having children, there will be thousands and millions and billions of people down the line that will never be born. And I think that is the biggest impact that you can have on the future, is to do your role really well. I think that's another thing, is that when women are confused about their role, they'll either do both halfway or prioritize one above the other and neglect the other one. So for women, that would either mean not having kids, or having kids and ignoring them for most of the time because they're focusing on their career, or having kids and ignoring the career part, at least for the time being, for their earlier years. That's how I look at it. And so I think you can't really have both. Like Megyn Kelly was saying, she was criticizing Matt for saying you can't really have both. You can't really have both at the same time in your life. You need to have priorities. You have to prioritize one above the other. And that is just, we're lying to women if we're saying that that's not the truth. If we're saying that they can have both, it's totally fine. Look at all these women that have done it. Okay, but how are their kids doing?
Right.
How did they feel about being left at daycare all day, every day? What kind of men did they marry at the end because they prioritized their careers at first and were stuck with the men that wanted the younger women and whatever? It's just harder to find men at that point. So like, it isn't the ideal. Stop telling women that it is.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's there's obviously an incredible incentive to hide what you're describing, to hide the actual results. When you see how all the incentives, the economic incentives, are to get women into the workplace, the sort of identity incentives are for women to go into the workplace. The sort of new definition of equality as being, instead of equal value, like equal in every way, zero role distinction. All those incentives, those are political, theological positions that are incentivizing these, for us to hide from men and women the realities of these trade-offs you're describing.
Yeah, and those women are actually contributing to what you're saying, like the lack of accolades to the mothers and the people that choose to
hiding
stay
that
at
as well. Yes.
Yeah.
Like, so we don't want to praise women too much publicly, because, and some of the feminists were very overt about this. They really called women, like one of the founding feminists famously basically said women who leave the workplace to go home are traitors to the cause. And so when you say this, and when you are advocating for this, it's not surprising that this confusion is going to be created. And I think what Matt is saying, and this is really that what's reemerging, and Jackson, I'm gonna get your thoughts on this too. So is really a sort of the way things always have been, in that we're finally, like, the word is finally getting out, and men are sort of seeing through what's happening here, and saying, oh, now that there's a lot more, a spotlight is being shined on the implications of the decisions that we've been making as a society to try to get women to develop workplace identities, and that this actually does have massive downstream consequences on the family and the quality of life of men, women, and children. And so men are seeing this, they are being, like, reminded of this. This is starting to be highlighted, and they're saying, oh, well, the natural attractiveness that I have for a woman who is going to prioritize family, instead of thinking about that as sort of some kind of backwards biological instinct that I need to somehow suppress, it's actually incredibly adaptive for the future, my wife's future, my children's future. And so they're no longer holding to this decision to, like, repress that natural attractiveness towards women who are going to prioritize family. So yeah, Jackson, any last thoughts on that?
Well, I think the last thing is, I think the last corporate lie that people aren't addressing or realizing is that whether you stay at home with your family or go work at a corporate job, you're helping somebody's family. And I think that most of these corporations, you know, like when you think of the great men or high power, they're the people that own the corporations. They're multi-billionaires, and and almost none of them accomplished it in a single generation. They had a multi-generational. I mean, Trump is probably the best current example of this. I think his grandfather was an electrician, and then his son, and then you know his father was a became a builder, and then you know started taking advantage of the World War II baby boom, where they were giving so much money to the government was subsidizing massive bills in New York. Then they started just owning portions of New York, and then he was able to support an Ivy League education for Trump and a big trust fund, and eventually Trump was able to turn that into the empire that is today, and now they run the country. But the person that people really should be, like watching right now is probably Barron. Like what is he about to accomplish? Because every generation of Trumps have built on what the last one has done and gotten even better. And if that's the mindset that Trump is thinking about, then Barron is going to be an incredibly powerful man. And I think that is the potency of a multi-generational family. And so this woman who is like, and those all happen through children being born, like you were saying, Dad. Like children have to be born in the next generation for there to be a multi-generational family. So if a woman is going to sacrifice that to go get a job, she is literally sacrificing her family for somebody else's family. You are now furthering the vision of whoever started this corporation. You are helping them, accomplish all their stuff. So you're still stuck following a man, getting the accolades they create to make you feel a little bit better about yourself, and completely neglecting what you could be accomplishing otherwise. And I think there's a part of that, like corporate veil, that men are starting to kind of take off and like peek behind the curtain a little bit. And they're like, wait a minute, like, can I be one of them? I don't want to be one of them, like one of the cubicle guys. I want to be in there. And as soon as you ask that question, that it's very disruptive. It's like, no, hold on. It's exactly the Wizard of Oz thing, like close the curtain, stop, don't look behind the curtain, please. This is not this, and we're like, whoa, we just found the secret sauce. Find a woman that, will start trying to establish your household, cast a vision, and within 3 generations, your kids could be extremely powerful,
Yeah.
talk about a high power job, like, and that's it. Like, so yeah, I think that's another a corporate lie that's beginning to kind of crumble. And it's really scary to the corporations if they're able to undo, like if conservative men, because of their selective, like who they're selecting, are able to undo women. Corporations are going to lose all the women, that are working for them, and they're all going to be focused on their own multi-generational families, and then there's going to be more competition when for the corporations within a couple generations. Very scary for them.
Yeah, man. Well, and this is why you guys, that when you think about, and I think a lot of women are saying, I want to find an arena that really is worthy of my all of my skills, and everything that God's given me, and on all my opportunities. And I think that often it's really, I really enjoy like coaching men to say, hey, look, if your wife has got a lot of skills, it's really important that you keep elevating your family, because she's going, like, if she's going to steward those skills in the context of this realm that you're creating, this household, but you're throttling the household, you're saying, hey, honey, I don't want to earn that much. I don't want to start a business. I don't want to have more kids. Like, it's those kinds of decisions that oftentimes men make in order to reduce their level of responsibility that really hold their wives back. When a wife hitches herself to this man and says, hey, let's build this thing together, then the man needs to be somewhat ambitious to build something that is worthy of his wife's great skills and great strengths. And that's going to take time. And there's a lot of those elements that just by providing and letting her have children at the frequency and the number that she desires to have them. I'm always incredibly suspicious of a man who tells his wife, we need to stop having kids because I don't want to bear more responsibility. These are the kinds of things that I think that really hold women back, and that I think are a violation of their God-given abilities. But also, if he doesn't ever attempt to build a legacy business or assets that the family might be able to steward together, then a lot of her skills are going to be underutilized. And so the reality is there's a pathway to fixing this problem. The pathway is within the household, the way it has been for thousands of years, not the 1950s wife where the husband goes off and everything he's doing economically is separated and disintegrated from the family. It's the way that families have been built for thousands of years. And that is the husband goes out in order to build assets that the wife can then help him steward and that their children can also participate in. And this creates an ecosystem that maximizes the kinds of things that the wife can do with her strengths and her skills. So there's a win-win coming, I think, in this. But man, we got to get away from the separation between the workplace and the household. Like that's what's really killing us as well in this. So thank you guys so much for jumping on here today. I know this is like for all of you guys listening, this is such an incredibly touchy and kind of topic, but it hits so many areas that we talk about when we try to understand multi-generational family teams. I thought this is definitely worth us discussing. So Sydney, Jackson, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for listening to Jeremy Pryor's podcast. Make sure you hit that follow button so you don't miss out on any future content. Follow Jeremy on Twitter and Instagram, as well as his Substack blog, all linked in the description. See you next time.